Hey everyone, and welcome to the Weekly Marketer Podcast. Every single week, we interview deep dive experts in one of the many fields of marketing to drop huge knowledge bombs from the best of the best and teach you how to take your marketing skills to the next level. This is episode 13, and I'm sitting with Sam Mallikarjunan, who is a CMO and an expert in market building. He's a former marketing fellow and head of e-commerce marketing for Hubspot. In addition, he's an instructor at Harvard and University of South Florida. Currently, he's head of marketing for Birdeye, which is the leading customer experience and business reputation platform that allows businesses to turn their customers into a powerful marketing engine. Sam, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So you have an extremely impressive background, and I think that pretty much everybody listening to my podcast has heard of HubSpot and maybe to some degree Harvard. You seem like you've held a number of positions at HubSpot, and kind of looking at your background, you've been CMO or a bunch of different companies. How did you get kind of started in the marketing world?
That actually is a funny story. So I was the host of an AM/FM talk radio show about cigars, and everybody in the cigar industry, they haven't really updated how they do business in 150 years or so. And one of them's like, hey Sam, I don't know why I'm turning it into an Italian mobster. Like, hey Sam, you know how this internet thing works, right? And I'm like, yes, I know how the internet works. And he's like, hey, can you build me a website? I'm like, yeah, no problem. I've been building websites for years, literally like hard coding HTML in Notepad. And then, I briefly did some ASP.NET programming at NASA back in 2006. I'm like, yeah, no problem. And I started building websites for them. And they were all super disappointed, not because of the design or the functionality, but they thought they would build these websites and suddenly money would just come pouring in.
That is my understanding how that works.
Right? Yeah, right. If you build it, they will come. I mean, there's a movie on this.
Right.
And so I'm like, and they're like, hey, well, can you help us with marketing? I'm like, no, I can't help you with marketing. I know nothing about marketing. And so I started Googling around and I found HubSpot, right? So I originally found a video from Rebecca Corliss at HubSpot called You Ought to Know Inbound Marketing, one of their early videos. And it was just everything that I knew and loved, right? Because it was, it talked about how cold calling is dead and cold calling is awful. And you should use social media to communicate with customers. All this was a new concept at the time, seems self-evident now, and so I literally just self-taught off of HubSpot content. And then I became I started doing marketing for the cigar industry. And just by nature of knowing the internet, right? I was qualified to start leading marketing teams in the cigar industry.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of businesses like that where it's my nephew, he's really good with computers. Let's make him head of digital.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it was back in the day, right? The interesting thing about my career is I had no and still have no formal secondary education training in marketing, but because the industry and the profession itself was so new, I was able to go do really cool things. I have people who take my class at Harvard or USF who have been doing marketing literally longer than I've been alive. But things have changed so much that if you catch one of those waves and you really pay attention and you try to learn, you can do some interesting stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So you got into that. So you were kind of self-teaching off of content marketing and inbound marketing and things like that, and kind of back in the Wild West days of that. And so you found HubSpot and you were learning from there. How'd you kind of make the transition from working with those kind of concepts, learning from HubSpot, to actually becoming part of HubSpot? How'd that happen?
That was an interesting story too, right? So I was a college dropout with not the right amount of experience for a company like HubSpot, who at the time had a lower acceptance rate than Harvard. But I decided I just became obsessed with them, and I wanted to go work with them. They were really smart. The modern concept of a SaaS tech startup was still kind of new, and companies like that just didn't exist, right? Ignore the free beer fridge and the ping pong table in the nap room, but those types of companies that have internal fellowship programs where they will work on, teaching you skills, and, this wiki with 100% transparency. Every bit of the company is completely open to all employees. That was so amazing to me that I actually created a website called hiremehubspot.com. Because I knew they weren't going to hire me, right? Because I didn't have a college degree, which is a prerequisite for them. And my marketing experience in the tobacco industry wasn't going to cut it. And then I ran ads targeting people who worked at HubSpot to register for the free webinar on why you should hire me. 3 hours and 26 minutes later, I got a call from the recruiter.
That's amazing. That's actually incredible. I know that like stunts like that, you kind of hear about them all the time, but it's cool to see that those like pan out. I think like the classic ad agency version is sending like a literal shoe to get a foot in the door sort of thing. As cheesy as that sounds. But yeah, no, that's incredible. So you're at HubSpot and you kind of got a job there and you've held a number of roles. How many different roles did you hold at HubSpot?
1, 2, I don't know, maybe 5, I think.
5 different roles. And so like how did your kind of time there evolve as you went? Like what'd you start doing? What'd you end up doing?
So first off, internal mobility is actually something that they solve for. Halligan, who's the CEO and co-founder, talks about how, especially with younger generations, moving around and expanding the breadth of your professional experience is something that's really important. And if you don't create a framework inside your company to identify people who haven't had a change recently and see if they want one, you make it really easy for other companies to poach them. And sometimes you reach out. I mean, we've got a woman on the content team at HubSpot who has been on the content team since there was a content team, and she's perfectly happy. She's an excellent writer. And then you've got people like me who I like working on new things, and I like working especially on problems where people don't really know the answer. And that's what was really useful to HubSpot. So they had me build out our experiments marketing. So experiments meaning, can HubSpot sell to different markets and different buyer personas? So can we sell to nonprofits? Turns out, yes, we can. Can we sell to like franchises? Turns out, no, we can't. Can we sell to e-commerce companies? Turns out, yes, we can in a big way. And so I went from there to leading the e-com team and then kept scaling my career from there.
That's really incredible. I like that they kind of took that approach of like experimental kind of figuring out buyer personas and figuring out whether or not you could sell to them effectively. It's a really forward sort of thinking way of approaching your marketing. So it's clear that you have a lot of like kind of breadth and depth there from kind of virtue of that. Now you're CMO of a company called Birdseye?
Birdseye is the frozen food company, and
that's great.
I intend to do some joint social media marketing with them soon because we both get confused for each other a lot.
Okay. That'd be great. So like a free bag of peas with every new account or something like that.
Yeah, or something, right? Like I don't know, like I don't know. We're gonna do something with them though because it happens a lot.
For sure. So tell me about kind of like what's your current role right now?
Yeah, so I decided at the beginning of the year I wanted to leave HubSpot because I wanted to go back and work at a smaller startup. And HubSpot's a cool company in that, all of the managers from the executives down try and impress upon you that if you want to leave, like tell us and we will help you find an awesome gig.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
Yeah, don't like quit and go to something stupid because it's actually, first of all, we might be able to convince you to stay, which HubSpot did do once before when I tried to leave. But second of all, it's a good recruiting thing for HubSpot when they say, hey, a bunch of our employees actually end up becoming like CMOs elsewhere, at really cool companies. And so I worked with, my boss, Kip Bodner, and some other people at HubSpot, and we vetted literally 144 different tech startups. And then this one, Birdseye, I think just felt like a really great fit for me. First of all, it's marketing technology software like SaaS, which software as a service, which is what HubSpot is, which it's a challenge that I know. But what I really loved about it was, as a marketer, a transformative brand story is what you want to sell. And, with HubSpot, it was this inbound concept, right? So like instead of interrupting people, you attract them with creating marketing they actually like and want to consume. Birdseye has this new concept that like no one cares what your sales and marketing team has to say about your company, right? Like I can sit here and tell you Birdseye is great. Birdseye is paying me, right, for the last 10 minutes and 54 seconds, right?
And I very much so appreciate them doing that.
Right, exactly. So it's completely meaningless to you. In fact, HubSpot does a trust survey every year, and marketing professionals are less trusted by surveyed American consumers than like politicians and lobbyists.
Oof.
Super embarrassing. But yeah, so like nobody trusts your sales and marketing team. What they trust is what other customers have to say, right? So it's not like me talking at you about me. It's me facilitating a conversation between you and some of the other customers that have worked with me in the past. And not only is this a more effective, and this is the other great thing that you look for when in a CMO role. Not only does it work, like we know it works, but it's also the way the world should be. So the metaphor that I use is, if you're a world-class like dentist or lawyer or auto body shop, you should not also have to be a world-class internet marketer. And conversely, if you're like a terrible auto body shop, you should not win just because you're good at marketing. But go ask your local mechanic like what they think of the local big dealership, and they're going to say they're overpriced, the quality is terrible, but they have really good marketing. So that transformative message, I think, this sort of like third paradigm shift in marketing is what just like made this irresistible to me.
No, that's fascinating. I really kind of like that approach. It is a little disheartening to hear that I'm less trusted than a politician, but you're not wrong. I guess I like to pat myself on the back and say at least I'm transparent about it. But yeah, so no, that's incredible. That's a really interesting shift, and kind of, you were talking about kind of this third wave of marketing and kind of the transformative shift in the way marketing should be, and I think that one of the things that sets you apart, from what I've learned about you is you have this ability to really kind of build markets. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people, when they look at marketing, they kind of look at it as this zero sum sort of game, where it's like, there's a bunch of competitors and this is the way that it works. And maybe I can do some positioning or depositioning, or I can just be better on tactics or what have you. But it's always framed as this sort of like, there is a market and I'm going to go take it. How does that sort of differ from like this market building sort of approach, and kind of like educating people on, new technology or like a different way of doing things, because that's really transformative and seems to be a lot more difficult.
It is a lot more difficult, but people look at a company like HubSpot, and I think what they fail to remember is how like very limited the software was, for its first sort of 5 or 6 years of existence before we acquired Performable and David Cancel, came in and really worked on the software. The reason HubSpot was able to grow wasn't because of the software. It's because we sold this movement, this ideal to the world, and people bought that. They bought this idea of inbound marketing. And if you've ever seen like the bell curve of adoption, just to use the fancy term, right? On the far left, you're going to have your innovators and early adopters. So like if you have a mobile app, I will download it just to see if it breaks my phone, because knowing how you broke my phone is useful information to me. But you can't grow a large segment off of me. And then sort of as you expand, people have to have like a reason. So the reason can be safety. There used to be a cliche, nobody gets fired for buying IBM. But if you're not already IBM, you have to give people some kind of transformative message for why they should do the work of buying your thing. Unless you're just going to sell it cheaper, and that's a business model too. But if you're trying to build a new market, you have to give people a reason and something that they can believe in that is powered by what you're selling.
No, that's it. That's interesting, right? Like this idea of like attaching yourself to kind of a bigger movement, if you will, or, in some cases creating a bigger movement. I think it's interesting too, how you bring up that you can't really build a market off of your early adopters. Obviously, like, early adopters are incredibly important, and those sort of like innovators, that first like 10% are very important, but you end up with interesting sort of like, you've got that classic sort of, what do they call it? Like the trough of sorrow or whatever, after you burn through the early adopters before you're actually hitting like kind of a more mass market appeal. I think, I guess my next sort of question I would pose to you is, how do you like kind of, obviously those people are important and they're really great to interact with because they will put your product through the ringer and they are, a substantive market, but how do you kind of like, when you're market building, how do you kind of take that next step towards like kind of, looking towards how am I going to make this a more mass appeal sort of thing? How do I move out of just like, selling this really cool message or this movement or whatever to early adopters? And how do I, make the rest of the 90% of a market, excuse my language, give a shit?
It requires hard decisions. So I'll use inbound.org is a good example of this. I was running, it was one of the projects when I was head of growth at Hubspot Labs. It was this like community that we wanted to build so that there was a home online specifically for marketers, which there really wasn't at the time. But it was originally like a side project joint venture between Dharmesh Shah, who's the technical co-founder at HubSpot, and Rand Fishkin, who helped found SEO Moz, which became Moz. And it was all just like SEO nerds in the beginning, right? Like hyper technical SEO nerds. And they talked about hyper technical SEO nerd stuff. That was fine. And they got to their first like 15,000 or so weekly active users that way. But there is a hard upper limit on the population of SEO nerds, right? So if you want to have an impact on the world, you have to do more than that. And a community is interesting in that as you bring people in, first of all, you need the community to want to bring other people in, right? And we actually, by making it about SEO nerds, nobody wanted to bring anybody else in because those other people would talk about other things. And we had to make a very difficult decision and say, like, hey, the total addressable market that we want is all inbound marketers, right? And that is content writers, that's designers, that's developers, it's analysts, it's all of these things that go far beyond SEO. And we published a post, and the community, we lost a bunch of those early adopters, which was emotionally difficult for us, but we intentionally rejiggered the user interface, changed what kinds of content was ranking, etc., in order to make it less useful specifically to SEO nerds and more useful to less technically sophisticated sort of general inbound marketers. So you've got to pick like who's your persona. And this is what I did my first role at HubSpot, right? Experiments. They had their main persona, like the marketing Mary buyer persona. And then they had me like testing some of these other things because they weren't going to allow any distractions from solving for the core large part of the market that they were best at, unless it made sense.
No, that's incredibly interesting. I think you brought up a really, really cool topic when it comes to marketing something new, which is kind of the emotional hits that come with that, right? When you're saying, how do you kind of balance that? You said that you lost a bunch of users, right? And for a lot of startups, they would freak out if they, churned a bunch of users on a project that they were doing, right? Because they thought that there was a bigger kind of mission. How do you balance kind of that practical data, kind of like user numbers, analytics sort of approach with kind of like looking for that right vision? And how do you know, especially when your kind of numbers are dropping, that you're heading in the right direction?
I'm about to get like way too deep for a podcast interview, but this is like a feature of the human condition, if you will. There's a great song on this. I'm blanking on who said it, but it's like they may not be the right, but they'll do right now sort of thing, right? And it's the same thing. It's with relationships, it's with jobs, it's with everything. Just because something is a good fit for you right now doesn't mean it's going to be a good fit for you forever. And it doesn't mean it would have been a good fit for you at some point in the past. And that's hard. That's super, super hard, right? Like realizing that, I don't know, like your high school girlfriend that you had a really bad breakup with or something, like now you're both different people and would be a great fit for each other. Or, all of those sort of changes, whether it's relationships or professional or startup markets, right? So your early adopters are early adopters, sort of by nature. And they may have been a great fit for you at one point, but you have to like deal with that sort of like stress and pain the same way you would with anything else, which is saying like, hey, like I'm a different company now. I want to be something that is not a good fit for what you're going to give me or what I'm going to give you. And so the worst thing to do is have what I call uninspired optionality, where you try and do both, right? There's a great phrase. I was giving a speech, I don't know, Istanbul or something like that. And it's like, who chases two rabbits catches neither. And I always love that line because I don't care if your family is starving and you need both rabbits to survive. You can still only chase one at a time, right? So you've got to make a decision and you've got to commit to it. And in terms of like the hard math behind it, like your overall numbers might be going down, but if you're tracking the proper like sub cohorts, right? You're looking at, so at inbound.org, for example, we had identified people who were not SEO nerds, and we were tracking the growth in weekly active users of that persona cohort, as long as that number is going up, we're fine. Even if the overall number is temporarily going down as we have attrition from a cohort we're not focusing on anymore.
Right, absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense. And that's, like you said, basically, that advice applies to a lot more than just startup marketing in general. So, I mean, yeah, that is interesting. So, like, kind of balancing that vision of saying, okay, our numbers are overall going to go down, but this is where we want to go because we think it's a bigger opportunity. And then basically subdividing down your metrics to focus on the growth into kind of that new vision is kind of how you would balance that a little bit, it seems like. So that's really fantastic advice. So kind of moving on there, let's say, kind of from a practical standpoint, like you said, you can't chase two rabbits, which is a phrase that I really love. How do you kind of decide what is the right customer for your kind of ultimate goal? If you're making like a disruptive piece of technology, right, and you're truly going out and you're trying to kind of change the way these markets work or create a new market for yourself. Let's say I've just got a disruptive piece of technology. How would you even kind of start that process of kind of creating the movement like you talked about, right? Do you kind of latch on to an existing movement? Do you kind of take principles from existing sort of things? Like how do you get started? What's that first step look like when you're marketing a new disruptive piece of technology or new disruptive, really anything, I suppose, that you need to kind of figure out and build a market for?
First of all, it helps for a movement to have an enemy, right? So with inbound marketing, we created outbound marketing, which at the time was just called marketing, to give ourselves something to juxtapose against. So you can define yourself to an extent by what you're not, and then you can also focus on selling that story. And when I say that, there's a great Jeff Bezos quote. It's something like, greatness requires the willingness to be misunderstood for very long periods of time. And, Amazon was very misunderstood for a long time. And even to some extent today, they make, I think I redid the math, $360,000 a minute or something like that, and almost no profit, because that's not like profit per shareholder isn't their business model right now. And HubSpot was the same way. I think people forget, like when HubSpot was first starting out, the eye rolls that we would get, like from people who were in the marketing and especially the sales profession, where they were like, okay, this social media thing is cute. Like blogs are what my, teenage nephew has on LiveJournal, not something that serious professionals do. Like that was something that required us sticking to it. And there's not really a formula for that, right? That really is sort of the secret magic of what makes entrepreneurs such fascinating people, is that vision and willingness to be misunderstood for fairly long periods of time and sort of sticking with it. And again, as long as you have the user acquisition, activation, and retention metrics within your core cohorts, especially retention, then it makes it easier to stick to it. So the one thing I want people to realize, right, other than nobody trusts you as a marketer, so empower your customers. The one thing I want people to think about is that customer retention matters more than anything else, right? Because if you're really good at keeping customers, you can spend more money to get customers. The value of the customer goes up, means everybody on the acquisition side gets a raise, bigger budgets, etc. And when you're looking at your product market fit, right? Like, do I have a message? Do I have a movement? Do I have content? Like on your blog, not just are you getting visits, but are those people coming back, right? Do you really have a sustainable product market fit with the message that you're selling to the market in terms of your actual retention? When you look at those metrics, you can start to see whether or not certain things are resonating, certain things are not with your core market, and make those pivots over time.
No, I think that's really insightful. And, I remember, for the record, I was one of those, like, kind of, it's interesting. I'm like squarely in the outbound marketing world, where like most of my, like the vast majority of my time is spent running Facebook ads, right, to various degrees. And so, even those of us in the social world kind of have had gripes with the, I will admit that in the past I've read things from HubSpot where I was like, I don't know about that. But they're obviously doing much better than I am. So take what I say with a grain of salt. But yeah, so that is an interesting take on that. I really enjoy your thoughts there. And so As you're kind of defining this movement and, finding those original people and, really looking to build that retention, which I also is incredibly important. I read somewhere that like 90% of your profits or something like that come from retained customers rather than acquiring new ones. With all that sort of said, what are like the practical steps that you would give as advice? Like I'm a guy sitting here with a piece of tech, do I go and do I start writing? Do I just start going on social? Like what in 2018 would you say is like the right way of starting in like a tactical sort of sense, starting to build these sort of like movements and build this like early adopter kind of group?
So a couple of things. One, like I just cannot overstate how important retention is. I think people don't think about, I don't know what the public numbers are, but HubSpot's average subscription price is like maybe, I don't know, $1,000 a month. They'll spend like $20,000 to acquire a customer, because let's say like they've got a lifetime value of, for argument's sake, $24,000. They can spend like $8,000 because they're really good at keeping customers, right? And so that's what makes them so competitive. They have a ridiculously large content team, right? They've got, I don't know, 30 or 40 or something like that people who create content for them, which is how their blog and everything is so awesome. And all that comes from the fact that they're good at keeping customers. Now, that is not the stage that most people want to focus on. Almost without fail, every entrepreneur that I talk to, every startup wants to focus on the top of the funnel. Like, how do I get more traffic? How do I get more leads? How do I get more users? If you start at the bottom of the funnel, so retention, and then also like sales enablement, like, am I just really, really efficient at selling? It doesn't take me a lot of time or effort to convince people to adopt the tool or even buy the tool. And then going from, working your way up there, that makes it so that you can have a much more efficient model. Like, don't pour gasoline into a leaking engine. Start at the bottom of the funnel and work your way up. And then from a very tactical perspective, I love some of the lean startup, Eric Ries sort of tactics. I have an idea for an app about every 6 seconds, right? Like most of us do.
I think I started 4 businesses earlier today. So
yeah, I've launched 2 startups since we started this interview. Yeah. And I always love, again, especially when you're technical, the temptation is to go build the really cool thing. And we had this in labs too, right? In HubSpot Labs. But what it came down to is if nobody's going to use the thing, like, don't build the thing. So how can you validate, and this is where marketing comes actually first in the process, is how can you validate whether or not people are interested in the promise of the thing before you spend a bunch of time? So I'll often make an animated explainer video and create a landing page pretending the thing exists, and then run Facebook ads targeting what I think is the core buyer persona. And that's the first question. Like, if I can't get people to sign up for the thing, I'm not going to make it. I had this app that was, what was it? It was like, it would automatically fact check the content that you saw in Facebook and Twitter. And then it would send you, like, you would take a political alignment quiz and it would send you the best research content that disagreed with whatever your stances were. Dude, no one wants that. Like, we say we do. No one actually wants like to get a newsletter every morning that just is literally designed to piss them off.
Right.
And before I did all the logic and work and spent all the money to make that, I was able to validate that, yeah, no one wants to sign up for this thing. And also people think I'm like a conspiracy, but that's
yeah, no, yeah, those are, I think a lot of people prefer their alternative facts, unfortunately. But
yeah, well, it's, yeah.
So that's interesting though. But so I've done a similar thing, right? Where like I look at it and I say, okay, I'm going to run some ads to a landing page and we'll see. So the question when it comes in that sort of experiment is how do you stay lean, but also say like there may well be a market for something. I just did a bad job targeting my Facebook ads or my landing page sucked or whatever. How do you kind of separate out the tactical from the strategic in kind of that validation stage? You know what I mean? Because there's some things that are great. So like HubSpot's a great example, right? You could run $2,000 worth of Facebook ads at something, get no paying customers and say, well, maybe this was a bummer. This is a failure, like how do you kind of like balance that tactical versus the kind of in like the validation stage, you know what I mean?
2 things. One, first of all, it doesn't have to be paying customers, right? So like when I chose the title of my book, I ran ads on Facebook. My book's called How to Sell Better Than Amazon. And the most difficult thing when you're writing a book is to win the shelf space visual battle, right? So there's a bunch of books on a shelf in a bookstore, and I have to get you to see mine, be intrigued by the name, and pick it off the shelf. And once I do that, the win rate's pretty high. The Facebook UI is actually a nice sort of analog because there's a bunch of stuff, kittens and puppies and fake news, whatever you want, that you can look at on Facebook, and my ad has to win that battle. And so I literally just looked for what had the highest click-through rate, right? Which was my analog for, am I catching your eye when buried amongst a bunch of other interesting things? And then the other thing is, this is something technical co-founders and technical founders in general hate hearing. Like, I really don't care how cool your piece of technology is if you can't sell it, if you can't market, if you can't grow it. I have seen hundreds of very exceptional startups with wonderful products who have died ignominious deaths because they weren't able to grow. They weren't able to like get people to use the thing. And whether that's because there wasn't a fit or they were bad at marketing, it doesn't really matter, right? You have to solve that problem first, before you sort of earn the right to get weird and start building fancy features and everything else like that. So I would say to the person who says like, I've got a great product, but I just can't get anybody to sign up for it, either get better at marketing or find somebody who is, or start questioning whether or not you actually have product market fit. If you don't have marketing market fit, like your product market fit is unlikely to be there as well.
Right. And I can't tell you the number of times I've heard I have a great product that like people need this. They just need to see it. And that turns out very much so not to be so for whatever reason. I think that, and it does tend to be more of the kind of technical founders or whatever. Do you think that's just people drinking too much of the Kool-Aid or why do you think that is?
It's just what excites you, right? So when you're a technical person, building something cool and solving an interesting engineering challenge is what you enjoy doing. It's what gets you excited and makes you happy and brings fulfillment to your life. And so like when you're a technical co-founder, if you don't have a counterbalance to you in the sense of a business side co-founder, you're going to focus way too much on, can I build a great product and solve the interesting engineering challenges? Because that's what makes you happy, and not the marketing, which if you have a good marketer, the reason I love marketing, it's my two favorite things, right? It's creativity and spreadsheets combined. And if you have somebody who can do both for you, or you can do both, then you're in much better shape. But I just think it's what excites people. I get really excited by interactions with people, right? So, having somebody at HubSpot tell me that, we single-handedly put his daughter through college, or having somebody at Bird Eye say that like, this is the best money that they've, especially small business owners, the best money they've spent in 35 years as a small business owner. Like, that means more to me than the fact that the product has like a really great integration with like, some tool or something like that, right?
Right. No, I definitely get that. And I like that. I appreciate your perspective there. And so I guess, for like the people that are listening, because most of my audience tends to be kind of like entrepreneur startup types that are kind of trying to figure out marketing on their own, or maybe know enough marketing stuff to be dangerous. When you're working with kind of a marketing co-founder or business co-founder, or there's a marketer on your team, how do you tell that difference between, oh, my marketer is crap versus, oh, maybe I don't have product market fit? How do you kind of suss that out?
Boy, you're not like softballing the questions here. I mean, that's a
I'm sorry, I do.
it's a tough one because, is the marketer doing a bad job, or is there not a fit for it? Right. I think if you have any users at all, you have product market fit if you have like user retention within a specific buyer persona. And if you have good user retention and you still can't grow, odds are it's your sales and marketing team. If you have poor user retention or no users, you can't get anybody to use the thing and keep using it, and your marketing team still can't grow, it may be the product market fit, right? So that's why like the messaging market fit, you got to figure out first. Then the product market fit, you got to figure out second. Then the like, can you scale, can you grow question comes into play. And your marketing team or leader should have pretty objective metrics, right? At the end of the day, the only thing that matters is, can I grow within the economics framework that the business supports, right? So, if I go into a new company, sometimes it's their cost per acquisition is way too high, and I've actually got to slow growth down while I get that under control and then ramp up growth again once I sort of get a more efficient acquisition engine. There's like a dashboard that my CEO gets every day that says like, hey, here's if Sam's doing a good job. And your marketing team, as you grow, should have that.
No, that's an excellent answer. I think that kind of hit it on the head, that retention really kind of is that big signal. And I like to bring the heat with the questions every once in a while, keep everybody on their toes. Yeah, so no, that's fantastic. So, you're kind of, I've really loved our conversation so far, where you're kind of saying, when it comes to market building, kind of high level philosophy, you've given a lot of kind of practical sort of advice as well. Is there, when you see kind of a new company going out into the market, what's something that you see that they do, like companies that you see do something just really wrong and you wish they would all stop doing? And then what are some things that you see companies doing right that you wish more people would be doing?
Yeah, for me, there's a very clear like binary value, which is, are you talking about yourself or are you talking about your customers? And you can see this on their brand websites. And a lot of early stage startup entrepreneurs make this mistake, which is it's all about us and it's about our features and everything else like that. And again, first of all, I believe, and the evidence is there, that no one cares what you say about yourself. They care what other people say about you. And conversely, no one cares, like when you're talking to me, I don't care what you say about yourself. I care what you say means to me.
But I'm really interesting and cool.
Yeah, right, exactly. And we've all met those people at a networking event or whatever, where all they do is talk about themselves the entire time. And it's just, it's super inauthentic. It's really annoying. And it is just a recipe for failure, like by definition, not a customer centric company. So obviously I loved a lot of the marketing positioning that we did at HubSpot, where we talked a lot about, how marketers felt. And, now it's especially now that you can measure marketing, it's not this sort of witchcraft where you get your budget cut at the first sign of like economic trouble. Some of the smartest people in any given company are on the marketing team. And it is a great profession that we can be really, really proud of, especially as we sort of move up the trust scale and start passing the politicians and lobbyists over time.
Hopefully soon.
Yeah. And so that was the positioning that HubSpot really hit. And there's a great quote by Henry Ford, which is, if I'd asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse, right? Obviously didn't found the Ford Horse Breeding Corporation. He founded the Ford Motor Company. And I think that if you, again, go one step beyond your features and start thinking about what is the benefit that I have in the person's life on this, what's the job to be done is what we call that, right? Then your product design is going to be better, but then also all of you'll see it in your marketing, right? Your website's not going to be talking about 46% cheaper, right? It's going to be talking about like, hey, like these are the benefits that we give to you. So that for me is a great early sign. If you're talking about the things that really matter to your customers, this great company, it's called Price Intelligently. It's the only time recently I've literally laughed out loud at a marketing tagline. And they have like pricing intelligence software, right? And their website tagline was, admit it, you guessed. And I just died laughing because that's how everybody does their initial pricing. They just guess. Like, that's how I do it. That's how everybody's done it. Like, hey, like I think I could probably sell this for like $250 a month. And then you run with it and you see if you can.
Do some Googling, hit the shopping tab and like, okay, yeah.
Them and I want to say it was Zoom, somebody who had like love working together again, which was just like, for me, such a meaningful tagline because I get so much fulfillment out of enjoying working with the people that I have to work with. When you have a marketing tagline that really, really resonates and a market position and a sales process and a product that really speaks to that depth of what matters to people, you're a rocket ship. You're going to be just fine.
I love that answer. That's fantastic. I mean, I've lived that too, which is, kind of you can always tell like kind of everything with marketing and like really everything with the company sort of shifts when you hit that, like you start talking about your customer and you're talking about their pain point and you kind of hit that like magical sort of like aha moment with your customer. Like the entire everything gets a lot easier, or at least that's kind of been my experience. So this has been absolutely fantastic. I have a couple of questions, that come in from my community that I wanted to kind of run past you. How do you create a buyer roadmap from zero is kind of what they're saying. So like, how do you create, like, I think, and if I'm going to extrapolate on this question a little bit, I think maybe they're saying like, how do you actually like start by designing like a funnel, if you will, if you don't know what the funnel is already? Like, how do you kind of iterate on that?
Yeah. So again, like you're going to start with where you have the most data, which is at the very bottom of the funnel, retention, and then work your way back up. By the way, if you have a funnel at all, you're beating most companies like who don't have sophisticated funnels. I know within our little like echo chamber of sophisticated digital marketers, that seems insane, but trust me when I say I have like very large organizations who have taken my class at Harvard, and the concept of like acquisition cost to lifetime value is like blows their mind. So first of all, don't be so hard on yourself. Second of all, a business model as a startup is a hypothesis, right? So you are going to design what you think the acquisition and retention monetization funnels are going to look like, and then you're going to test that, right? So, and you're going to revise your assumptions over time. It's one of the reasons I usually start at like running ads against a landing page, is because if I can't get a cost per lead that is going to make sense within what I think I can sell the thing for, because face it, I guessed, then my business model itself is broken, right? So I've either got to figure out a better way to have a product with more monetization or something else, or better retention or whatever, or that's not going to work. So you're going to have question marks. Be okay with a little bit of ambiguity. If you're within plus or minus 10% or plus or minus 15% of what your actual CAC will be as you get cost of acquiring a customer will be as you get more growth and more data, that's fine. The key is just you don't have to outrun the bear, you have to outrun your buddy. You don't have to be more accurate than you don't have to be perfectly accurate. You just have to be like more accurate than the people you're competing with, and have a better concept of that. And then the other thing is, remember the purpose of data is directional guidance. With the exception of finance data where you'll like go to jail if you lie about it or if you're wrong, the rest of it's directional. So I tell my team all the time, like, I'm okay with you being wrong as long as you're consistently wrong, because then the directional information is still the same. And so that's my big guidance there, right? All startups, all business models, all new campaigns, everything's a hypothesis. Even if just a new campaign, I've got my team who's currently staring through my glass, wall here because they want to talk to me. And, I know they want to talk about a different paid campaign they want to run, and it's a hypothesis. They think that the CPL, the cost per lead, is going to be X, and the lead to op is going to be Y, and the op to close is going to be, that's going to give us a specific CAC. The key is not to never be wrong. The key is to be wrong insanely fast, right? How quickly, even before you build the thing, proving yourself wrong, or if you do have to build the thing or whatever, the faster you can be wrong, the more chances you get to be wrong, which means the more likely it is that you're going to be right, and you're going to be right in a big way.
Right. I think that's a fantastic answer. Yeah, absolutely. So fail fast, fail often. Don't drag out your failures. Next kind of question here. How important is public relations in regards to building a community of early adopters?
Almost zero, right? So public relations.
Okay, almost. I like that. I love the honesty.
Yeah, public relations within the context of like, how am I perceived and how am I communicating myself and relating to the larger sort of market as a whole, mostly irrelevant, right? So especially early adopters, by definition, these are people who want to buck conventional wisdom, right? They want to buy the thing that nobody else is buying. They want to use the methodology nobody else is using. These are not people who particularly care what the public as a whole thinks about something, and also like, you're going to run into your biggest fear is that nobody cares about you, not that, people have the wrong image or perception of you. So if you're talking about branding, messaging, positioning, yeah, that matters because that sort of dictates how you're going to be able to sell. But public relations in terms of like, having a very controlled corporate communications message, I wouldn't worry about that until those people start to matter.
I think that's a great answer. I think a lot of people though use that sort of public relations as like a as a proxy for get covered by like publications, right? Like get, an article in the New York Times or what have you.
Yeah, I mean, if that's a growth hack you can pull off, that's fine. I mean, David Meerman Scott's got that great book, Building a Worldwide Rave, right? Like, and it may be the New York Times, but it may also be, much more niche influencers in your industry that you want to get coverage by. I mean, I would put that under like more like growth marketing than PR, even though that might fit that way. If that's what the questioner meant, then make a decision. Is this something that somebody's going to want to cover because it has a compelling story? And, if it is, then can you execute against it? And is that going to help you hit your growth goals? If it's not going to help you hit your growth goals, like don't get press coverage for the sake of getting press coverage. Like they're almost all no follow links. It's not like useful.
Right. Fair enough. So next question, is involvement in the industry ecosystem important when it comes to building a new company? Like, so I think they're asking about like industry associations and like meetups and things like that, like getting out and like, kind of being involved with like the professional associations of the world and things of that nature.
The problem with the real world is it's hard to scale. So, I gave, 61 keynote speeches last year in 49 US states and 11 other countries, which sounds cool, right? But any given blogger, any given like writer on the HubSpot blogging team reached many, many more people than I did, right? And I fit into a different part of the strategy because HubSpot is a much larger company, and they are concerned about sort of getting the PR and selling some of their movement ideas to different markets. But that's a balance I think you have to make. If your early adopters are going to be there, or if people who are good biz dev relationships are going to be there, that's always great. But people go to associations, and associations are designed to fit the way things are. I would be way more interested in going to meetups within those associations, or any one of those associations probably already has events that are like the weird people. So the limousine industry is one that I'm thinking of. There's this guy in Nashville, Tennessee, who runs this like boot camp for limousine people. His name is Bill Faith. And if I was doing something in the limousine industry or the transportation industry in general, like I would rather go to one of his events with 1/10 the number of people than go to one of the larger industry events. But that's a hypothesis that you would want to test yourself and see, am I going to get growth out of this?
Fantastic. So last question. When you have a community of early adopters, how do you keep engagement high? Like engagement with your early adopters, I assume, is what they're getting at.
That's the scalable one-to-one. I mean, first of all, okay, you got two things you can do here. One is getting really good at scaling the one-to-one interactions. A lot of that is like automated customer success, automated marketing and account management, whatever it is. Like, how do you have many more touch points? Your worst case scenario is that the only times your customers communicate with somebody at your company is when there's a problem. There was an e-commerce startup called Gemvara out of Boston, and I remember its founder, a guy by the name of Matt Lausen. He talked about how they were actually trying to optimize the number of touch points between customers and the support team because that would increase retention and increase engagement. That's hard to scale. I mean, there are ways, and you should definitely try that. The other thing is, can you get people talking to each other? That's the real magic, right? When you get people who are passionate enough about it and who are willing to help others, it lowers your support costs, it increases your retention, it decreases your marketing costs. Just like on the marketing and sales and marketing side, no one wants to hear from you. They want to hear from your customers. Within the community side too, like they love talking to each other, right? And if you can facilitate, this is part of why we built inbound.org, is you can facilitate those interactions between people, you're going to have higher engagement, you're going to have higher customer success, and you're going to have like an army of people who can help you solve the unlimited number of like support use cases, that people have. So think about not only how do I use, automation and onboarding processes to scale my relationship as a business with the customer, but how do you design productive interactions between your existing customers and then scale that?
Fantastic. I think that was a really thoughtful answer. So thank you very much for your time. I'm going to go ahead and let you pitch whatever you want here for just a minute or two, whatever you want to pitch. I've had everything from businesses, obviously, to charities, to some really kind of off the wall things. Somebody pitched a recycling initiative that they were really passionate about and stuff. So whatever you would like to pitch for the next minute or two to the listeners.
I don't really have anything to pitch. I mean, you're more than welcome to go check out birdeye.com, especially because you have an audience of marketers. The great thing about my job is I'm a marketer marketing to marketers about marketing. So I'd love to hear y'all's like feedback on that. I would also say if I had one ask though, I love talking to people about this stuff. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on my website, mallikarjunan.com. I do a lot of like just coaching and mentoring with startups. If you guys are having that, I also do a lot of career coaching with younger marketers. So feel free to reach out to me if you have questions, if you want to dig into stuff. My biggest complaint is not that people abuse my time; it's that people don't use it enough. So reach out.
You're a very kind person for offering that, and I think that's a fantastic pitch. Truly appreciate you taking the time to be with us here today on the show. For everybody out there listening, a ton of gold here about how to like actually approach getting that early kind of community and how to kind of build a marketing program that's really bigger than itself, and how to properly take what is a new sort of delicate idea, right? Test it. And then once you've tested, kind of attach it to a larger movement that you can really utilize in order to grow the company in a way that makes people truly passionate about it. So Sam, thank you again for taking the time to be with us, and everybody out there listening, happy marketing.